And now we're going to look at the traps and zaps of the various positions within Catholicism. We'll start with the Fraternity of St. Peter. If you are in the Fraternity of St. Peter, your priest is going to have to be, quote-unquote, obedient to the current regime. Your priest is going to have to do, and he's also going to have to be careful to say, those things which will not offend or get him into trouble with his so-called ecclesiastical superiors. The priest and the people that go there must also tolerate the pollution that the conciliar church insists upon putting in that traditional chapel. Maybe, for example, the abomination of desolation, that is, the Novus Ordo, is celebrated there. And of course, that implies all the abuses and sacrileges that go with the Novus Ordo, including communion in the hand, perhaps quote-unquote female altar servers, and so on and so forth. The people that go to the fraternity chapels and the so-called motu proprio chapels, which the SSPX used to call the indult or the insult mass, well, those people know that they are constantly walking on ice, so to speak. They dare not criticize the regime or anything the regime does, or their quote-unquote privileges will be taken away. Also, they feel that they have to support the regime in order to placate it, and so they give generously to the quote-unquote diocesan appeals or the Lenten appeals or whatever other appeals that the diocese uses to fund its coffers for its probably nefarious activities, of which you are more or less supporting. Moreover, fraternity priests risk being polluted with the heresies of the conciliar church. They risk being polluted with its naturalism. They risk being polluted with the false devotions in the conciliar church, such as the luminous mysteries and the quote-unquote Divine Mercy Chaplet. Now let's move on to the traps and zaps in the SSPX. The SSPX used to have a very good party line back in the 1990s. They were implacably against Vatican II and the new Mass. They told people not to attend the new Mass under any circumstances, which is very good advice. They told people to have nothing to do with the conciliar church, also very good advice. But then, of course, in 2001 began the Great Thaw, so to speak. Well, any of us who were paying attention recognized in less than a New York minute that what was occurring in the last years of the pontificate of JP2 and through the years of the somewhat brief pontificate of Benedict XVI was the church equivalent of perestroika and glasnost, which of course Michael Gorbachev and the gang used in order to convince the world that communism had collapsed, when in fact the reason that the wall came down was because they really didn't need it anymore. Mission accomplished. They had succeeded in communizing the West. They had succeeded in destroying in the Western governments all notions of private property and the sanctity of the home and the sanctity of the family. No, all of the tenets of the Communist Manifesto were alive and well in the West when the wall came down. And now, 10 years later, the same thing would happen to the SSPX and to a lot of the quote-unquote traditional chapels. But this was a much grander wall that was coming down. The wall of separation between truth and error. Because truth can admit of no impurity. Because if it does, it is no longer truth. It is just a more cleverly disguised error. So Bishop Fillet began to say things like, oh, well, Vatican II can be interpreted in the light of tradition. Well, that's not the point. The point is that Vatican II is not tradition. Vatican II is not a reflection of tradition. Vatican II, and Anne Barnhart put it very succinctly, is a dog's breakfast in a dumpster fire. That's what Vatican II is. Vatican II contains heresy. Benedict XVI, when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, called Vatican II a counter-syllabus, referring, of course, to the syllabus of errors of Pius IX. And that was a very introspective comment because that's exactly what Vatican II was. Oh, I know, but we're modern man. Our ancestors were just clodhoppers that went everywhere in horse-drawn buggies or on the backs of mules. They didn't have television, they didn't have automobiles, and they couldn't get on a jet plane and fly across the ocean in comfort and convenience. How wonderful modern man is and how far we've come in the march of progress. Right. But where was I? Oh yeah, talking about the traps and zaps in the SSPX. Well, there you have to be careful that you don't become your own parallel magisterium. Because that's exactly what Archbishop Lefebvre wanted to avoid. Or at least that's what he said. Because I'm beginning to have my doubts about Archbishop Lefebvre. I'm beginning to believe that this conspiracy, or whatever you want to call it, goes a lot deeper than what many of us would care to believe. You know, in the real secret of La Salette, Our Lady said that during the reign of the Antichrist, men would become indistinguishable from women. Well, gee, that's exactly what we're seeing today. It's too bad that the real secret of La Salette is not very well known. It's being buried amid a myriad of false secrets. False secrets that read more like something you would see in a supermarket tabloid. Like, for example, about the Antichrist being born of a nun and howling blasphemies from its birth. Those false secrets. Which is perhaps one of the reasons why the third secret of Fatima has never been revealed. In the divine providence, that's probably been a good thing. Those of us who have studied Fatima and are paying attention know exactly what the third secret refers to. It refers to the present apostasy that we're going through. Maybe we don't know all the gory details and word by word of what Our Lady said, but certainly by now we can fill in a lot of the more important and salient points. In fact, there were those in the 90s who were filling in the more important and salient points. Bishop Venancio gave that whole game away when he said, I think it was somewhere in Austria, that the secret doesn't concern nuclear missiles, but rather the loss of faith. Now at this point, I don't know who's read The Secret and who hasn't read The Secret. I don't care. I do know that there are a lot of people that have trolled The Secret, not the least of which is Malachi Martin. But that is all irrelevant. In the SSPX, you have to become aware that you must not make your priests your pope. Many people in the SSPX have replaced my pope right or wrong with Bishop Fillet right or wrong, or my priest right or wrong. But everybody's still looking for a hero. Everybody's still looking for somebody to do their thinking for them because they don't want to think for themselves. And now I move on to the quote-unquote Sedevacantists. The Sedevacantists, at least they will address the 600-pound gorillas in the room. They will ask whether or not these Novus Ordo ordinations are valid and if we even have a valid apostolic succession in what is left in the Novus Ordo Church. Their solution is to form a parallel magisterium. Now, while none of these priests have gone and gotten themselves elected pope, many of them have allowed themselves to be consecrated bishops in ceremonies that are most dubious from this so-called tuck line that is also most dubious. Many of these bishops, we can't really trace their apostolic succession with any degree of confidence, because Archbishop Tuck was quote-unquote ordaining people in secret and in private. Well, this is completely contrary not only to canon law, but to the norms of Holy Mother Church. Everything should be done out in the open and in public so that we can have a moral certainty that we are actually dealing with successors of the apostles. But with none of these so-called tuck consecrations can we have that moral certainty. And therefore, they must be avoided like the plague. You should be able to figure out by now that the apostolic succession is hanging by a thread. And that, ladies and gentlemen, leads me to the conclusion that Our Lady of Fatima is truly our only hope.